Found this one on D&D memes of all things. Worst gaming experience I ever had was a guy who, in spite of being 25, acted like a spoiled, racist, and homophobic man-baby who would literally pick up his dice and go home if the game wasn't going his way. But he was the DM's best friend, so we all had to put up with his antics. I eventually left for unrelated reasons and found out they finally kicked him out after he screamed at the DM's wife for not playing the game correctly, i.e. doing something that would have benefited him and nobody else. People always talk about DMs favoring their significant others, but DMs letting their best friend's antics slip because they're best friends? I think that's way more common. Remember, DMs, if you're gonna drink the tears of your players, make sure to drink all of their tears equally. So, sometime in November 2020, one of my friends invited me to a 5th edition campaign. I was the only one who didn't personally know the DM. My friend played as a tiefling sorcerer, someone else played a half-elf cleric, who I'll call cleric for simplicity, and a variant human rogue. I was a homebrew race, jackalfolk, monk. These homebrew people are usually lawful, I was lawful neutral, and very importantly, have advantage in death saves. But they also don't know a lot about the world in different ways. My character didn't know what magic really was, for example. He figured, some people can just say magic words and the gods give them power. Which was true for cleric, so there was no reason for him to think otherwise. He was also fairly intelligent, but had -2 on wisdom. This is because in his monastery, no one really lied, so he believed a lot of people that he considered to be good. Now, this was a homebrew campaign where magic worked differently. Magic was a barely obtainable energy with lots of risks when used. Not for our cleric, though, because I guess they were the DM's favorite. Anyway, the campaign was hosted over Discord, and there weren't many problems. I showed them my homebrew, they said, seems balanced, and with that, the first 2 sessions went on. Everything was going fine, a lot of roleplay and cool world building. But one time, we were facing a mind flare, and I almost died. I had to make a wisdom saving throw, and because of the -2, it failed. And I would have failed the death saving throws if it weren't for my advantage. The DM went on for the rest of the game on how close I was to dying. Not in a, wow, that's so cool that you saved that kind of way. More like the, how could you have that homebrew that I approved kind of way. I figured it's fine, he'll be over it by the next session. Boy, was I wrong. He hated me for the rest of the campaign. He treated me like I should be dead. It helped that cleric would constantly heal me because it seemed like 2/3 of the enemies were targeting me, and the rest would actually target the party. One time, I was hit with 4 attacks and would have been put on my death saving throws if Cleric wasn't healing me next initiative. The DM also started giving the party level ups, but not me. I mentioned it like a joke at first, but he did it almost half the time. There was a scene where I was up against a shambling mount, alone because the rest of the party decided to split up. The rogue actually wanted to help me, but the DM said, "You should probably just stay with the party so no one gets hurt." He also made a snarky comment on, if he dies, he'll just live anyway. He has death save advantages. You could tell he was pissed about me being alive. I got past it without that much of a problem and met up with the rest of the party later on. You know, right after he put me through hell, he had more than 9 enemies on me one time, and the battles were really sloppy, not to be rude. You could tell he didn't have that many enemies actually prepared. Almost to the end of the campaign, he had several cultists, long story, attack the party, and I'm not lying when I say I was the target for all but 1, and that was because the last one was healing. He insisted to the cleric that she shouldn't heal me several times. He got me down to wisdom death saves again. I rolled a 14 -2 equals 12, failure. I rolled an 8 -2 equals 6, failure. I rolled a natural 20, success, then a 16 -2 equals 14, failure. I should have lived, but no, failure. I mentioned I have advantage. I definitely should have lived overall, but I'm the DM. I make the rules. You died. Roll up a new character. My friend defended me. Do you want me to kill you too? I finally asked the DM, do you hate my character or something? It feels like you've been trying to kill him the whole game. He responded, yeah, well, you're too inexperienced to make homebrew anyway. I never should have approved it. So, I left the campaign, so did my friend, and apparently the cleric did too. My friend told me that he said, what a crybaby. He's probably so mad about this right now. My friend and cleric don't know about Rogue. Stopped being friends with him after that. It was actually kind of a shame. They were a great DM and an amazing world builder before they started hating me. I also want to mention, One time my character was in a conversation with an NPC who was great at controlling magic, was a plot point. My character, who had no clue what magic was, or how people used it, asked about magic. My character said at the conversation, "So do you have like a magic wand or something?" The DM threw his hand to the table and just said, "That's not how magic works." Okay, yeah, well my character doesn't know that. Well then, maybe you shouldn't have made him so dumb. And then said how the wizard insulted me and mentioned, "People like you should be dead." Not sure if it was intentional, but it was very possible that it wasn't really the wizard talking to my character. Overall, happy ending? I'm not quite sure how this could have gone better. Maybe me dying and rolling a new character? My friend actually thanked me after the campaign. They said that their friendship was toxic and I gave them an excuse to stop being friends with this DM. So I guess there was more good than bad, and I'm pretty sure we ended the campaign when we left. Hopefully before taking a reality check. I probably wouldn't approve a homebrew where you get advantage on death saves. It's just not something that I like in my games. However, that's the key word there, I wouldn't have approved it. Now, of course, sometimes things get through the cracks. You think something's going to be okay, but then you get to gameplay and it turns out an element of a character is overpowered. You don't respond to that by trying to relentlessly kill the character and holding a petty grudge against the player like they're some kind of supervillain out to ruin your D&D game. You fix that by having a mature conversation, which this DM was clearly unable to do, which is a shame. No matter how good your world building or your dungeon mastering is, it doesn't matter. If you are an immature dick, then your game's not going to be good. Simple as that. I recently decided to save my forever DM and take the hot seat myself. However, I severely underestimated how challenging DMing can be. The first session came faster than I could prepare, and I barely had anything ready. I wanted to present my players with something immersive and fun, but it just wasn't in my budget. If only I had gone to the 1985 Games Patreon. 1985 Games, the sponsor of today's video, has opened up their Patreon where you can get access to a treasure trove of D&D content, including digital maps and whole new homebrew rule sets for D&D 5th edition. But the real treasure to me is the Dungeon Crafter Kit, a digital library of literally thousands of assets that come straight from Dungeon Craft. All of this content is available to you at only the $3 tier. So absolutely head over to their Patreon if you want access to their amazing content. Of course, if you are a dungeon master running an in-person game, the 1985 Games has also got you covered. The aforementioned Dungeon Craft is not just a library of virtual assets, it is also a set of physical books. Their latest release, Fallen Kingdom and Jungles of Dread, is available on Kickstarter right now for pre-order. So, if you're interested, head down into the description down below where you can find the 1985 Games Patreon website and Kickstarter for their newest Dungeon Craft books. Thank you so much to 1985 Games for sponsoring this video. As always, supporting our sponsors does support us. And without further ado, I'm going to turn back into an animated rat so that we can get back to the video. I've sat in the story for years after browsing this subreddit for quite a while, and I would like to vent it out. The setup: new DM homebrews 5th edition campaign for all new players, 7 of us, and forbids us from making evil characters to start when it's not an evil campaign. Everyone agrees. Myself playing the ranger, bard, sorcerer, monk, barbarian, and paladin, the problem. Oh right, there was also a wizard. Paladin, out of game, was a real douche to play any game with, TTRPG or otherwise. He was the kind of person that singularly derived entertainment from annoying or ruining the game for others. In TTRPGs, he self-inserted and took everything said and done in character personally and would, out of character, act out for it. Initially, he played his paladin fine, albeit weird. He had a bad habit of approaching NPCs and giving them vague statements of warnings and never explaining himself, leading to a lot of unnecessary alarm and suspicion of the party. In his backstory, he wrote, he was a centaur, that he had a son and wife that died in a forest fire, so he loathed everything and anything that had to do with fire. This is relevant later. He also stated in his backstory, without reading any of the DM's lore, which states that centaurs are peaceful and migratory, he stated that he participated in centaur wars and butchered babies and innocents, but was reformed now. This is also relevant because he constantly judged the party for disposing of hostile monsters and their eggs as, but would sit and justify for fun. As a centaur, he hated that the DM included ladders and doorways that he could not fit through in her world, and would mope and become very passive-aggressive and stop participating in anything when a door showed up, even when characters would stay behind to hang out with him. By the way, he was a moose centaur, so he was unreasonably huge and large. He constantly asked other characters, despite taking the Oath of Ancients, tenets about love and happiness and all that, extremely inappropriate and invasive sexual questions about their partners in character, and when they were dodgy or not go his way, he would punish them out of character and hate them in real life. This happened with the monk, who he terrorized because he wasn't forthcoming with this information. What? He could not accept that his character had an intelligence score of 8 and would metagame despite being told he would not know certain information. For example, there was a plague spreading that would turn people into zombies. This is high fantasy with no modern medicine. My ranger moved to action for a dying child that was literally vomiting blood and begging to see her parents again, held the child as she died and got covered in her blood. We didn't know how diseases work or how they spread, as this world had never experienced that. The paladin, on the other hand, refused to go near the child and told everyone not to touch her blood, and despite being corrected and told he has an intelligence of 8 and not being a healer, wouldn't know this information, he insisted and refused to play it right. We caught much later that he was cheating nearly all of his rolls as well, especially when he would roll for his health upon leveling up. He claimed to have exclusively rolled 8s and above every single time. For 9 levels, he never rolled in front of anyone, as we had a trust system in this group since we'd been friends for years and never played together before, but now we know better. This, along with him beefing himself up only and never tanking for the party, he would literally run off to do 1v1s away from everyone else using whatever dual thing paladins get, making our encounters extremely hard. Okay, finally the meat of the story. We were in a cave down in the base of a canyon investigating claims of a missing cleric. What we found was a succubus and her half-human child hoarding diamonds in an attempt to bring back the human parents who was kept in a tomb nearby. Combat happens, he's thrilled that he gets charmed and starts fighting us, and we win and start investigating the room to find out this information. One of the items we discover was a ring, who the monk reads as being hella evil, so he leaves it alone and we plan to seal the room off with rock so we can leave. Catching that we are leaving, the paladin runs back, snatches the ring up. When we asked why, he said he wanted to cleanse it. Out of character, we knew better, but in character we didn't, so our characters let it be. Cue the next several months of an evil entity within the ring reaching out to him and attempting to beguile him. Despite us passing through several churches after he picked the damn thing up with insanely powerful clerics, he never, ever gave it up and kept this evil ring tied directly onto his holy symbol. This ring led to possessions during boss fights that made him attack us. He loved this, by the way. It also screwed with the party as a whole with illusions made by Ranger appeared to have an incurable plague that was ravaging the land. And eventually, it all came to a head when we found a cult, and he screwed us up due to a possession and we nearly lost some party members. In character, we found out he kept the ring. It corrupted his holy symbol and it dimmed his paladin powers. We took the ring off of him and yeeted it into the jungle. But by then, it was too late, as what had been inside the ring the entire time was a powerful demon lord. The crap with the ring had gotten so bad at this point that we were in character as a party no longer trusting him and took specific spells to fight and kill him if he were to turn on us at any point. When this came up out of character, he insisted he'd beat us all 1v6. He was really butthurt about his dimmed paladin powers, and after that refused to help us win in fights. During the fight with the avatar of a god the cultists were trying to bring back, he discovered that he would have to use a turn of movement to get across the huge room to be in striking range. He hated this, and so he never moved the entire fight and did not do a single point of damage to the boss. He very promptly looted the room though and claimed a staff that we tried to give to the monk, but became extremely aggressive out of character, like yelling and cussing at everyone, so we eventually just dropped it. The staff had an evil god of fire symbol on it, and it was a staff of fire. When we asked about his backstory with his raging over fire in the beginning of the campaign, he merely shrugged and said, "Oh, he got over it." The DM just used an NPC very shortly after that this paladin liked to break the staff and take it from him, as it was the only way he would accept it being taken. We were on the east coast of the continent after a while, investigating some claims about the Elven King when this dumbass finally prays to his god and asks for help. The god tells him that he must take a candle into the darkest place, light it, and fight the demon. He is given a literal candle for this, and soon after this talk, the demon appears and goads him into lighting it. He does, immediately, thinking that he's one-upping the demon or that it's a magic candle and it won't burn out. Surprise! The candle is a regular candle, and the place we needed to go was all the way on the western end of the map, weeks of travel. Bless the wizard for being fire-based. This got that character hated at the beginning of the campaign by the paladin. He got to cast endless flame on the candle to keep it from burning up. The next several months of sessions was fighting demons trying to snuff out the candle and traveling to this place. We eventually fight this demon, in which we horribly lose, and soon after, the player out of character left in real life cause he moved, and it was his last session. The DM, who is my partner, told me later that she had been in talks with him during this, in which he expressed that he would never choose to be evil, but would play it if it went that way, with the ring, and decided to make every single decision after that in an attempt to force the DM to make him evil. He also lamented all the time that he would love to play a rogue instead, and steal all our things and harass us, and eventually have the freedom to be more of a dick. This is another example of a DM who definitely should have seen the red flags, seen the warning signs. This guy was pissing everyone off. Now, I get it. I've been in this DM's position. I made a whole video about my RPG horror story where I had a problem player in my game and it went on for months. And yeah, because we were all friends out of character, I didn't know what to do about it. So I do sympathize, but you do need to do something about this because it can really result in your campaign getting really messed up and players just feeling bitter about what's happening in your game. Now, luckily, the paladin gave the DM an easy out because he moved. So I suppose happy days for that. But if you find yourself in this situation, talk to the player. And if they're not receptive to criticism, then they probably need to go. So this is going to seem really rambly and really stupid, so just hear me out. I was playing with a group I've been playing with often, consisting of me, one of my high school friends, and two randoms that were friends with the DM. Names will be myself, Aaron my friend, Jack DM's friend, and Jill, DM's other friend. So I've played with this DM before, and well, we had a few problems, but I kind of wanted to play with Aaron, my buddy, and the other people seemed pretty cool, so I decided to deal with my annoyance and just enjoy the game. I was playing a conjuration wizard with the creation spell. So we were hiding in a room while a horde of zombies and other baddies were trying to break in, and the DM said that we had 1 minute to think of something to block them off, as Jack was preparing a spell to teleport out and not, kill us all. I had the idea to use the creation spell to seal the door with some material that would hold. I told the DM my plans, and he said, "No, you can't." When I asked why, saying, why not? The spell says I can. Is there another reason? He just said that he doesn't want me to. No actual reason. That's it. This game was marketed as a game where we had to think about things and use our abilities creatively to get out of traps and such, and everyone really liked that idea. I just said, I'm gonna take a minute to cool off, and left because I didn't want to be that one really annoying guy who argued with the DM. Then maybe an hour later, I noticed I was kicked from the server, and the DM said that everyone didn't like the fact that I left, and they all just voted to kick me. Now, I DM a game with Jack and Jill because I thought they were cool people, and I noticed they hadn't left my game, so I didn't really believe the DM. Should I ask the other players? Was I being a jerk by leaving? Sorry if this seems rambly and obnoxious. If anyone wants me to delete this, I will. Also, a few edits for clarification. The DM had pulled crap like this before. We played D&D 5th edition. I tried to join back after a few minutes. I only got a message why after an hour. Also, I'm still getting comfortable with English, so sorry if the sentences are weird. Final edit. I talked to the other players, and all of them had the story that the DM said that I left for no reason, and that I ghosted. I informed them that I was actually kicked, showing them the messages, and they collectively agreed to drop the game. Well, this random story I posted because I thought I was an idiot got way more popular than I thought. Well, I'll be out. I'll still be replying in the comments for questions. Yeah, the DM is absolutely the asshole here, not the OP. D&D is a game where you're supposed to come up with solutions to problems. DMs shouldn't punish players for coming up with smart solutions. Using the creation spell to block the door, completely valid. Why the DM banned it from happening, I have no idea. Probably because it seemed too easy to him. But look, if the players can come up with an easy solution, that's their solution, and a DM shouldn't just get upset about it. And if a player wants to take a break, take a breather, don't ban them from the server in response. That is absolutely ridiculous. Now, obviously, this ended in the OP's favor, with the other players deciding to also leave and assumably staying in his game as well. So that is good for them. However, this does suck. Don't do this as DMs. Your players are gonna come up with solutions. Don't be upset when they do. For some context, my group of friends and I were heavily involved in a Minecraft role-playing server for a solid year or two. Overall, we had a good time, and it helped spark my passion for character design. However, this is where our hero, quote-unquote, enters the story. Let's call him Steve. This is a long one, so fair warning, TLDR at the bottom. We've known Steve a long time, and he's always been that guy. He can be quite annoying, but also has his pleasant moments. When we used to RP with him, he always ended up creating the self-insert, Mary Sue type characters. He'd often diverge the current plot to his character and would be highly offended if any of us didn't adore his. Then he'd get bored, kill them off, and create a new character to integrate into the group. It was a perpetual cycle of new, then dead Mary Sue characters. This summer, our DM told us he was planning a starting D&D campaign for our group, as only a couple of us played up at school. There was going to be quite a few new players, including Steve. Due to his RP history, we had low expectations and were expecting the worst. And now, to the nightmare. Part 1. The Encounter. Due to our Session 0, our characters had already met and had begun to form friendly relationships. Except for Steve's character, a warlock, but he's honestly just an edgy ranger with magic. So, after a quick introduction, we were thrown into our first encounter consisting of a vampire, 2 werewolves, and 2 skeletons. Although it wasn't an overall difficult encounter, it ended up being a roughly 6-hour fight spanning 2 different sessions due to the sheer amount of players. So, patience was running thin. To keep this shorter, I'll just list off the stuff Steve did during this fight. Garbage Steve did was, but was not limited to, claiming he was doing all the work after killing just the skeletons while we were dealing with the werewolves, who were resistant to most of our martial attacks, complaining about having to do attack rolls, getting upset at the DM when he rolled low and missed, taking about 20 minutes for each of his turns. As he was a new player, this wouldn't have been as bad if he wasn't scolding the other new players for also taking a long time. Finally, trying to rush other players and the DM during their turns. He also just didn't understand any of his abilities. Again, this wouldn't have been that bad if he wasn't attacking the other new players for the same thing, calling the DMs BS when his 6 strength pseudo-dragon rolled low and couldn't break through a window, claimed he'd be real upset if he couldn't one-shot enemies, demanded that our paladin heal him even though they were about to finish off the vampire, plus there were other players who needed healing more, acted like an expert and would constantly interrupt the DM when they were trying to explain abilities to the other players. So overall, Steve was so much better than expected. Part 2. Role-playing in the town. After the encounter, the DM explained he would give us some time to explore the town and do some role-playing. Steve responded, "What do you mean we're gonna be role-playing?" "Well, it's not all gonna be encounters. There'll be some role-playing in between." "But that's boring!" This crushed our DM. The DM who created an entire town, colorful characters, and who was simultaneously managing 2 to 4 separate roleplay interactions. Imagine having to roleplay in this role-playing game. The audacity! During the aforementioned fight, myself and another character got infected by the werewolves. So for our roleplay adventure, we decided to look for a way to cure that. Steve joined us. To get more information, we kidnapped and interrogated some of the vampire's guards. However, after learning they were decent people, we refrained from killing them. They so kindly led us to a witch doctor who would be able to cure us. During the trip there, Steve continuously tried provoking these guards, clearly trying to spark another fight and encounter. However, the cherry on top was when he announced he was just gonna kill the guards. When the entire party, consisting mostly of chaotic neutral characters, tells the good aligned Steve to not kill the innocent guards, there was clearly a problem. Due to the cries of the party, he decided not to kill them. Thank God. About halfway into the session, Steve got bored due to the lack of fights and just left the call, much to the party's relief. While we can at least handle Steve and prevent him from doing something stupid, it has become exhausting. TLDR, new player is a constant hypocrite and fights with the DM when he gets low rolls, then tries to provoke fights with NPCs out of boredom. Look, everyone's gonna have their preference in D&D, roleplay, combat, whatever. But if you can see the other players having a good time roleplaying with the DM, you can see the DM having a good time, don't just come out swinging with, roleplaying is so boring. It's gonna seriously ruin the mood of everyone at the table. D&D requires engagement, it requires people to kind of be into it, especially role-playing, and especially role-playing with new players. What Steve did there was, yeah, like the OP said, crush the DM spirit, and in a similar vein, I'm sure he also probably crushed the other player spirits as well. It just makes it less fun for everyone involved. Steve is a selfish player. Nothing more to be said than that. He just wants to fight and do damage and not really care about anything else. His attitude during combat only builds upon this. In summary, don't be like Steve, guys. Alright, and that is all that I have for you today. If you guys enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then you can check out my campaign diary series where I go over my D&D campaign and the lessons learned from my sessions. And while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content right as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment role-playing with an exclamation point and a question mark to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.